Let's talk about how to make a slip knot, which is what you will use to actually start your whole piece. So I'm going to start with the tail of the yarn in my right hand and the rest of the working yarn that's still attached to my yarn ball in my left hand. I'm going to make a loop with my left hand, and then I'm going to put my thumb and my index finger into that loop. I'm going to reach over and grab the tail that's in my right hand, and then with my right hand I'm going to pull on both tails, so the short end and the long end that's still attached to the yarn ball, and when I pull, my knot comes together and I have my loop. I'm going to grab my hook and I'm going to put it into that knot, and then I'm going to hold the hook in my right hand and I'm going to use my right fingers and my left hand to pull the tails apart from each other. And you'll notice when I do that, the loop tightens around my hook. And now I'm ready to start crocheting. All right, now I'm going to show you how to hold the yarn, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to do it. So the way that you're going to see me do it throughout this whole process is I grab the yarn between my thumb and my ring finger, and then I wave my hand towards myself so that I can wrap the yarn around my hand and hold the knot or the piece that I'm working on between my thumb and middle finger on my left hand. But if that doesn't feel right or that feels really confusing, the other thing you can do is just hold your yarn in your left hand and manipulate the yarn instead of working your hook around. So let me show you what I mean. The way that I'm going to chain is I'm going to start by doing something called a yarn over. So the way that I do this is I bring my hook down under and behind my yarn. I turn my hook towards my left hand, and then I pull my hook through the loop that's on my hook. As soon as I get through, I push my hook towards my left hand. So again, I'm bringing my hook down under and behind. I'm turning it towards my piece. I'm pulling through that loop, I'm turning my hook back up to face me, and I'm pushing through. The other way that you can do this, if you're not comfortable holding the yarn that way, you can take your yarn around your hook, hold onto the piece with your left hand, then you're still going to turn your hook towards your piece, pull through, turn your hook back up, and push towards your left hand. So again, bring your yarn over your hook, turn your hook towards your piece, and you can see that the hook hooks that yarn. You're going to pull through that loop, turn your hook back up. So you can go ahead and just practice this whatever way feels the most comfortable for you, because this yarn over and pull through is something that we are going to use a lot when we actually start crocheting. So go ahead and make yourself a chain, and then when you feel comfortable, you can do the fun part, which is just pull it all out. Now that you're comfortable chaining, I want you to go ahead and just chain 2. So I just yarned over and I pulled through 2 times. Now I have 2 chains, and I am going to work with what's called second chain from the hook. So here's the last chain I just made. I'm going to the second one away from my hook. And now I'm going to actually start to make my crochet stitches. And it's going to start similarly, but there's an extra step. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hook into that chain. So now it looks like there's actually 2 loops of yarn on my hook. I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to pull my yarn through just that first loop. I'm not going through that second loop. So I got to be careful to not accidentally pull through both. Now I have 2 loops on my hook again. I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to pull through both loops. And that's a whole stitch. I've just made a stitch, and I'll show you in a second how to count it. So I'm going to do that same thing again into that same place where I just was. So I'm going into that 2 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through just the first loop. And then I'm going to yarn over and pull through both loops. Do that again. So I go into that hole. I'm going to yarn over and pull through. When I do this, it's really important to push your hook towards your left hand, because you don't want these loops to get too tight on your hook. Then it will be really challenging to pull your yarn through. So you want to make sure they can wiggle around a little bit. Then you're going to yarn over and pull through both loops. For round 1, you're going to do that 6 times. So I've done it 3. I'm going to finish off 4, 5, 6. And then let's take a look at how to count this. So I'm going to pull my hook away from my piece so that this loop gets really big. This will help me from not accidentally pulling out my stitches. I'm going to turn to look at the side of my piece, and I'm going to look at that loop that it was on my hook. That loop leads me into a V. So that V there, that is a stitch. And I know I've made 6 of them because I counted. So I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that is how you single crochet. So to make an increase stitch, we're just putting 2 single crochet stitches into 1 stitch. So we're going to use this when we want to make our shape bigger or create different shapes. In this case, I'm going to find my first V, my first stitch right here, and I'm going to make my first stitch right into that spot. Then I'm going to make my next stitch into the same spot where I just was. So there's 2 ways I'm going to find that place. If I pull gently on the stitch I just made, you can kind of see that a hole opens up. That is where my hook is going to go to create the second stitch of this increase. The other thing that you can do is you can look at these 2 strands of yarn that are wrapped around our working yarn, one that sits right underneath your hook and one that wraps around the working yarn and into the piece. So I'm going to actually follow that strand of yarn right into that hole where I just made my first stitch. I'm going to complete my second stitch, and that is how you do an increase. Now I'm going to make a decrease. So to decrease, when we increased, we made 2 stitches from 1. When we decrease, we're taking 2 stitches and we're making them 1 stitch. So I'm going to put my hook into my first stitch just like normal. I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop, but instead of completing the stitch, now I'm going to go into the next stitch. I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to pull up a loop. So now I have 3 loops on my hook, which I've never had before in this piece. But all I'm going to do to decrease is I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to pull through all 3 loops. Now I have 1 stitch, you can see it, where there were 2. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do 2 singles. Here's 1. Here's my second single. Now I'm going to decrease. So I put my hook into that first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. I don't complete the stitch. I go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop again. Now I have 3 loops on my hook. I yarn over and I pull through all 3 loops. Here we go again. Do a single, then another single, decrease. Hook goes into the first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. Hook goes into the second stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3. And I'm just going to continue that all the way until I get back to my stitch marker. Okay, so now if I've done this correctly, I should have 18 stitches. So I went from 24 to 18. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And now I'm ready to go on to my next round.